We also heard from two men who worked with John Skelton before his sons disappeared in 2010. And through their testimony, we find out a little bit about John's interpretation of his relationship with Tanya, and we find out about what he may have said in regard to where the boys could be before they disappeared. I'm Melissa Andrews, a crime and investigative anchor and reporter covering the case. So the first coworker is Frank Kramick, and he is a truck driver who worked with John Skelton at a company called 3D Transport that was outside of West Unity, Ohio. He testified that John complained about working very hard and then having to pay so much money in child support to his daughter previous to his marriage with Tanya. But there was one conversation that really stuck out to him after the boys disappeared, and that conversation really caused him to take action. So according to Kramick, the two discussed Lost Nation, which is an area in Hillsdale County where they talked about going bow hunting. And Kramick testified that Skelton said, you could bury a body out there. So he noted that, and then when he heard that the boys had disappeared, he said that he personally went out there because there was an old factory in the Waldron area, and he thought it potentially could be a place where someone could hide someone. And he found that building to be secure. So up next, we heard from another 3D Transport employee. His name was Keith Prelip. He said that he initially saw John Skelton as a good worker, but he noticed some changes in John and his work behaviors once he started experiencing marital problems with Tanya around September or October of 2010. He testified that Skelton frequently volunteered for longer runs to Florida because that's where he was from, and he was adamant that he wanted those trips. Prelip said that John had reasons to go to Florida, including a class reunion, and he mentioned that he kind of reunited with a female friend who he described as having cancer. But Prelip testified that Skelton began having some troubles getting deliveries and pickups completed on time, and he was eventually taken off those Florida runs, and he was not happy about it. Prelip also said that John's attendance became sporadic, and as he was going to counseling, he was struggling to get loads delivered and increasingly wanted to get home quickly. And then shortly before Thanksgiving in 2010, which is when the boys disappeared, Prelip said that Skelton wanted a letter that he'd been terminated. But Prelip said that they wanted to continue employing him, and they just assumed that Skelton wanted that termination letter so that he could collect unemployment. On cross-examination, the defense attorney established that that was just Prelip's assumption, that John Skelton never told you he wanted to collect unemployment, correct? And Prelip agreed that he never said that. Now, this witness is going to give us a timeline about the months leading up to the boys' disappearance and all of this marital turmoil that comes to play. David McFarland is the director of the Lenawee County Friend of the Court, but in 2010, he was a family law attorney who represented Tanya. He testified that he met with her in September of 2010 and considered this situation urgent. According to McFarland, John had taken two of the children and was heading toward Florida. Tanya filed for divorce on September 13th, which was the same day. He testified the situation was moving so quickly that the initial divorce complaint did not even request child support because the immediate concern was keeping the children in Michigan. So this is immediately when Tanya said that John signed the boys out of school. He said that one of the documents was specifically intended to keep the boys in Morenci. The judge ordered that the children remain in the schools and stay in Michigan. He described Tanya as panicking while two of the children were then on their way to Florida. So they come home from the school, everybody's distracted, and John takes off with the two older boys. So then a week later, on September 20th, the judge signed another order saying that the children were not to leave the state of Michigan. Skelton gets his own attorney. There was a temporary parenting agreement giving John the children every Wednesday after school beginning October 6th and every other weekend while they waited for this custody hearing that was supposed to happen later in the month. Then he also testified about November 26, 2010, the Friday after Thanksgiving when the boys were reported missing. He said that Tanya called him and, reported that the boys were missing and said that no one was taking her seriously. The Morenci police would not come there. So he got on the phone with the Morenci police and said, this is a very serious situation and someone needs to go there immediately. Tanya had also asked him whether she should go inside the home, and he said no. We didn't know if this was a crime scene or anything at that point. I think that this testimony is actually really important because it's giving the judge a context for what was happening legally between John and Tanya in the very weeks leading up to the disappearance of these boys. Remember, Tanya testified that they really didn't have too many marital problems before John just started insisting that he wanted to move to Florida. But here we see there was an active divorce now, a custody dispute. There was some urgency with this, and a judge had ordered specifically that the children were not to leave Michigan.